The galaxy held its collective breath as the creature walked into the grand chamber of the Galactic Senate. It was pink-skinned, nearly hairless except for patches on its head, and walked with a disquieting biological asymmetry that made the more geometrically evolved species flinch. Ambassador Xylith of Proxima Centauri leaned forward, their crystalline appendages clicking softly as they whispered to Grand Senator Vex Mora. They call themselves humans, primitives from a backwater world called Earth. Vex Mora's 7 eyes blinked in sequence. And why have we summoned them here? Their technology barely allows interstellar travel. Because, Grand Senator, Xylith's voice dropped, they have done something impossible. They have weaponized kindness. The human representative, Commander Ilara Frost, stood before the assembly of 12,000 species, seemingly unintimidated by the grandeur. Her small mouth curved upward at the corners, what her species called a smile, a gesture that sent ripples of unease through the chamber. The Senate had encountered countless warrior races, but humans were an anomaly. They conquered not through force, but through adaptation, integration, and a terrifying emotional intelligence. Distinguished representatives, Frost began, her voice echoing across the massive chamber. Earth extends its gratitude for this invitation to join the galactic community. Grand Senator Vex Mora fluttered his wing membranes. Commander Frost, let us dispense with pleasantries. Our intelligence suggests your species has been engaging in unauthorized diplomatic relations with the Taurian hegemony, our most formidable adversary. Frost's smile never faltered. We believe in hearing all perspectives, Grand Senator. Earth seeks peaceful relations with all sentient life. Peace. The word reverberated from Ambassador Quilzur of the militant Drazak Empire. Your peace has destabilized 8 star systems in less than a solar cycle. Murmurs rippled through the chamber as data projections materialized, showing how human culture had infiltrated resistant societies through something as simple as their entertainment transmissions, their music, their humor, their bizarre sporting competitions. Somehow, these primitive signals had bypassed sophisticated firewalls, cultural barriers, even biological incompatibilities. Commander Frost remained composed. We simply share who we are. Is that not the foundation of mutual understanding? Understanding, hissed Ambassador Loriath of the Telepathic Next Collective. Your species lacks even rudimentary psychic abilities, yet you've somehow compromised our most sacred thought sanctums with your ideas. The chamber grew tense as evidence mounted of humanity's uncanny ability to forge alliances, upturn millennia of tradition, and inspire revolutions, not through force, but through connection. Their diplomatic corps had negotiated peace between species locked in thousand-year wars. Their cultural exchanges had inspired technological innovations across disciplines. Even their primitive foods had become sought-after luxuries in the most sophisticated corners of the galaxy. The human capacity for empathy is a weapon more dangerous than any we have cataloged, warned Security Director Maltho, a massive tentacled being. They intuitively understand what motivates other species, sometimes better than we understand ourselves. Commander Frost's composure finally cracked. With respect, Director, empathy is not a weapon. It's a bridge. A bridge, Vex Mora replied coldly, that your kind uses to cross into territories where you were never invited. The lights in the chamber suddenly dimmed, and a holographic projection appeared, showing the impossible. A human colony on Dura Prime, the homeworld of the notoriously xenophobic Durath. The Durath, who had rejected all diplomatic initiatives for 7 centuries, were seen willingly interacting with humans, engaging in commerce, and most shockingly, participating in human recreational activities. Explain this, demanded Vex Mora. Frost looked at the images, then back at the Senate. Her smile returned, but different now, tinged with something the Senate's vast translation matrix struggled to identify. That, she said simply, is friendship. The word triggered emergency containment protocols. The Senate had no defense against such a concept. Ambassador Xylith's crystalline form vibrated with agitation. Grand Senator, the human representative, is requesting what they call a demonstration of their capabilities. I advise extreme caution. 2 standard cycles had passed since Commander Frost's introduction to the Senate. In that time, 17 additional species had requested formal alliances with Earth, species that had previously shown no interest in cooperation with anyone. Vex Mora studied the human as she stood in the containment field, seemingly unconcerned by her predicament. What exactly does she propose to demonstrate? She wishes to interact with the Vorlon emissary. A collective gasp echoed through the chamber. The Vorlons were among the oldest species in the known galaxy, existing as pure energy. They communicated exclusively through mathematical equations and had never shown interest in biological life forms. They maintained membership in the Senate purely as observers. Impossible, Vex Mora declared. The Vorlon has not acknowledged any species in 800 years. Yet the luminous being that represented the Vorlon continuum had, inexplicably, requested the human's presence. Under heavy guard, Commander Frost was escorted to the specialized chamber where the Vorlon emissary resided, a perfect sphere of swirling energy patterns. Security Director Maltho activated every monitoring device available as the human approached the ancient entity. What followed defied explanation. The human simply stood before the Vorlon, smiled, and began to sing. It was not a complex melody. Primitive vibrations of air molecules, lacking the sophistication of quantum harmonics used by advanced species. Yet the Vorlon responded. Its energy patterns shifted, synchronized, and began to pulse in harmony with the human's vocal patterns. In the monitoring room, instruments exploded. Impossible, shrieked Ambassador Quilzer. They're communicating on a fundamental frequency we've never detected. For 3 hours, Commander Frost and the Vorlon engaged in what could only be described as a conversation, though no words were exchanged that any monitoring device could detect. When Frost finally emerged, she appeared physically drained but satisfied. The Vorlons have agreed to mediate the Andromeda dispute, she announced simply. Stunned silence fell across the Senate. The Andromeda territorial conflict had raged for millennia, costing billions of lives. No diplomatic solution had ever been found. What did you offer them? Demanded Vex Mora. Shakespeare, Frost replied. They find our literature fascinating. Analysis of the event revealed something more disturbing. During their exchange, the human's neural patterns had temporarily achieved a state of quantum entanglement with the Vorlon's energy matrix, a feat previously thought biologically impossible. This changes everything, Security Director Maltho declared during the emergency council meeting. If humans can connect with Vorlons, there is no species beyond their reach. Ambassador Loriath's telepathic projection flickered anxiously. They don't even understand what they're doing. Their empathic abilities are not technological. They're instinctive. They forge these connections without conscious effort, which makes them more dangerous, not less, rumbled Counselor Drax of the Sentinel Worlds. A weapon wielded unconsciously cannot be regulated. As the debate raged, surveillance showed Commander Frost in her quarters, engaged in what appeared to be a ritual. She manipulated small objects on a flat surface while humming to herself. What is she doing now? Vex Mora asked wearily. Our best analysis suggests it's a game, replied Silith, a primitive form of strategic entertainment called chess. She appears to be playing against herself. No, Maltho's voice was hollow. Look at the neural scan. The data was clear. Somehow, impossibly, the human was simultaneously operating as 2 distinct consciousness patterns, engaging both sides of the game with equal focus. They can divide their minds, whispered Loriath in horror. They call it imagination. The report came from the outer reaches of Senate space. A derelict vessel of unknown origin had drifted into the territory of the notorious Krex Dominion. Historical archives identified the ship as human, a primitive exploration vessel launched centuries before their mastery of faster-than-light travel. It contained no weapons, no valuable technology, merely cultural artifacts. Music, art, literature, and scientific observations. The Kreks, hulking, chitinous creatures evolved from apex predators, had a single response to all encountered species: subjugation or annihilation. They had never accepted Senate authority and remained the greatest military threat to galactic stability. Yet when the Senate dispatched observers to verify the vessel's destruction, they discovered something unprecedented. The Kreks are studying it, reported Scout Commander Telsix, voice trembling across subspace channels. They've established a research outpost around the human vessel. They're analyzing everything, especially something called comedy. They appear to be attempting to understand humor. Security Director Maltho's tentacles writhed in distress. This is catastrophic. If the Kreks integrate human emotional processing. Honored representatives, Commander Frost interrupted during the emergency session. May I suggest this development represents an opportunity, not a threat. The Kreks are curious. Curiosity is the foundation of empathy. The Kreks have no concept of empathy. Ambassador Quilzer snarled. They are conquerors, nothing more. Frost's smile returned, that unsettling facial configuration that had come to symbolize human unpredictability. Then perhaps they're evolving. What followed became known as the Kreks incident. The Dominion dispatched a diplomatic envoy to Earth, unprecedented in their 10,000-year history of interstellar aggression. Human cultural attaches were invited to Kreks space. Within weeks, Kreks warriors were observed engaging in human recreational activities. Within months, they had established their first-ever non-military exchange programs. This defies all predictive models, lamented Ambassador Loriath. The Kreks' brain structure should make them immune to human social engineering. The Senate surveillance network captured a particularly disturbing interaction. A massive Kreks warrior and a human female engaged in a ritual involving rhythmic movement to patterned sounds, what humans called dancing. The Kreks, whose species communicated primarily through pheromones and ultraviolet color shifts, was attempting to mimic human body language. They're adapting their biology to better understand humans, whispered Silith. Not the other way around. When questioned, Commander Frost seemed genuinely confused by the Senate's concern. Connection is a fundamental instinct for our species. We seek it without thinking. That is precisely what disturbs us, replied Vex Mora. Your connections reshape galactic power structures that have maintained stability for millennia. Perhaps those structures needed reshaping, Frost suggested gently. Tension reached breaking point when intelligence revealed the humans had shared their gene sequencing technology with the Kreks. Technology the Senate had expressly forbidden sharing between species. The Kreks were using it not for weapons, as feared, but to modify themselves to better perceive human emotional cues. The humans have weaponized evolution itself, declared Counselor Drax. They must be contained before they destabilize the entire galactic order. The vote was nearly unanimous. Humanity would be quarantined, their representatives removed from Senate space, their colonies isolated through spatial distortion fields. The humans did not resist. Commander Frost accepted the Senate's decision with that same unsettling smile. You misunderstand us, were her parting words. We don't seek to conquer. We seek to belong. As the spatial barriers activated around Earth and its colonies, the Senate breathed a collective sigh of relief. That relief lasted precisely 6 days. Senator Vex Mora's chambers were in chaos. Representatives from 15 key systems had abruptly withdrawn from the Senate, declaring alignment with a new interspecies collective, one that included humanity at its core. How is this possible? Vex Mora demanded. The quarantine barriers should prevent all communication with human worlds. Security Director Maltho's normally imposing form seemed diminished. The barriers block physical transit and conventional signals. But the humans, they found another way. The evidence was stunning. Humans had developed what they simply called the network, an interspecies communication system based not on technology, but on synchronized neural patterns. The most sensitive telepathic species had detected it first. Subtle resonances across the quantum fabric, patterns that bypassed conventional physics. They're using consciousness itself as a transmission medium, explained Ambassador Loriath, their telepathic projection unusually unstable. My people have theorized such connections for millennia, but never achieved them. Humans discovered it by accident. More disturbing was how the network functioned. Unlike telepathy, which required genetic compatibility, the human method worked across any species capable of emotional response. They called it empathic resonance, the ability to not merely understand another's emotions, but to experience them directly. It's a vulnerability in sentient consciousness that we never identified. Maltho admitted. Humans exploited it instinctively. A holographic projection appeared, showing brain scans of various species engaged with humans. In each case, neural synchronization occurred along patterns previously undetected by Senate science. "They're not conquering minds," whispered Ambassador Xylith. "They're connecting them." The greatest shock came when the Vorlon emissary broke its eternal silence to address the Senate directly. Its message was simple yet devastating. Human consciousness operates across dimensions our science has only theorized. They are not primitive, they are fundamentally different. Investigation into Earth's historical records, now freely accessible through the network, revealed the source of humanity's unusual abilities. Unlike most evolved species, humans had developed in an environment requiring constant adaptation to threats rather than specialization. Their consciousness had evolved to model reality in ways that allowed for rapid collaborative problem-solving, creating what humans called imagination, empathy, and intuition. They evolved as pack predators who survived through cooperation rather than biological superiority, noted Counselor Drax. They had to understand the minds of both their prey and their packmates. And now they're applying that understanding to every species they encounter, concluded Vex Mora grimly. A new report arrived from the quarantine zone. The humans had somehow established diplomatic relations with the quantum phase beings of the Helios Void, entities the Senate had classified as non-sentient natural phenomena for lack of any successful communication. Commander Frost's parting words echoed through Vex Mora's mind. "We don't seek to conquer. We seek to belong." With growing horror, the Senate realized the truth. Humanity didn't view the galaxy as territory to be won, but as a community to join, and they would reshape that community, consciously or not, through the simple, terrible power of connection. "We must decide." Vex Mora addressed the remaining Senate members. "Do we continue fighting this expansion of consciousness, or do we attempt to understand it?" The vote was no longer unanimous, but the decision was clear. The quarantine would be lifted. Earth would be invited back to the Senate, not as a minor member, but as the nexus of a new approach to galactic unity. As the official invitation was dispatched, Security Director Maltho made a final observation. Their true power was never in their weapons or their technology. It was in their smiles. The Great Hall of Reconciliation, hastily constructed in neutral space, hummed with tension. Representatives from all Senate factions gathered alongside delegates from the newly formed Human Cooperative. Commander Ilara Frost had been replaced by Ambassador Tereko Konko, whose dark eyes carried the same unsettling perceptiveness. "We appreciate the Senate's reconsideration," Okonkwo began, his deep voice carrying easily across the chamber. "Humanity has never sought conflict. Yet conflict follows you nonetheless," observed Grand Senator Vex Mora. "In one standard cycle, you have rewritten alliances established over millennia." Ambassador Okonkwo nodded thoughtfully. "Change can feel threatening, especially to civilizations built on stability. But stagnation has its own dangers." The meeting's true purpose soon emerged. The Senate sought to understand how humans had created the network and whether it could be regulated. Scientific specialists from a dozen species presented theories, each more elaborate than the last, about the quantum mechanisms humans must have engineered. Okonkwo listened patiently before responding. "There is no technology behind the network. It's simply conversation. Impossible, declared Chief Scientist Greltov of the Mechanist Conclave. The energy patterns we've detected cannot be generated through mere biological processes. A small smile crossed Okonkwo's face, that same expression that had become synonymous with human unpredictability. May I demonstrate? What followed stunned the assembled representatives. Ambassador Okonkwo invited each species delegate to share a story, any story, from their cultural heritage. As each tale unfolded, sensors detected the same quantum resonance patterns associated with the network, growing stronger with each narrative shared. Stories, Okonkwo explained, are how humans have always connected. We evolved sharing experiences, creating shared mental models. When I tell you a story, your mind recreates my experience. When you truly listen, our consciousness temporarily synchronizes. Security Director Maltho's tentacles twitched nervously. You're claiming this powerful consciousness-linking network is simply storytelling, enhanced by emotional resonance. Yes, Okonkwo confirmed. What you call the network is simply the natural progression of how humans have always communicated. We don't just exchange information, we exchange perspectives. Ambassador Loriath's telepathic projection flickered with realization. You're not manipulating other species, you're teaching them to connect as humans do. Precisely. Detailed analysis revealed something the Senate scientists had overlooked. While human technology was indeed primitive by galactic standards, their neurological structure was uniquely adapted for this form of connection. Humans operated at an unusually high level of internal neural chaos, what they called creativity, while simultaneously maintaining coherent thought patterns. Their minds exist in a perpetual state between order and chaos, explained scientist Greltov, a condition other species achieve only in altered states. This allows them to model reality in ways we cannot. More significant was the discovery that extended contact with humans gradually altered the neural patterns of other species, creating new neural pathways that mimicked human connectivity, a process humans called teaching, but which the Senate had mistaken for infiltration. You're changing us, Vex Mora stated, not as an accusation, but as a realization. Ambassador Okonkwo's expression grew serious. And you're changing us. That's the point of connection, mutual transformation. The most startling revelation came from the Vorlon emissary, who broke protocol to address the assembly directly. Humans perceive reality through narrative. Their consciousness creates meaning through story. This is neither primitive nor advanced. It is unique. As the summit concluded, a new understanding emerged. Humanity's power was not technological or military, but perceptual. They experienced reality differently, and through connection, they shared that experience with others. The Senate voted to establish the first interspecies consciousness research initiative, with Earth as a primary participant. For the first time in galactic history, species would deliberately explore not just each other's sciences and cultures, but each other's ways of being conscious. As Ambassador Okonkwo departed the chamber, Grand Senator Vex Mora posed one final question. Does your species understand the responsibility that comes with this power you wield so unconsciously? Okonkwo's reply was simple. We're learning. Together. 10 standard cycles passed. What began as cautious research into human consciousness expanded into a galactic renaissance. The network, once feared as a human weapon, had become the foundation of a new interspecies civilization. Grand Minister Vex Mora, no longer merely a senator, stood on the observation platform of Unity Station, watching representatives from 300 species engaged in what humans called a festival, a ritualized celebration combining narrative, music, physical movement, and shared consumption of biochemically compatible nutrients. It's extraordinary, observed Ambassador Xilith, their crystalline form now modified to better perceive human emotional cues. A century ago, these species couldn't communicate without translation matrices. Now they share dreams. The most profound changes had occurred in Senate governance itself. The hierarchical structure that had maintained stability for millennia had gradually transformed into what humans called a collaborative network, a fluid system where leadership emerged contextually rather than through fixed authority. "I'm still not convinced this is stable," Vex Mora admitted. 10 cycles is nothing against the time span of galactic civilization. Perhaps stability was overvalued, suggested Ambassador Tarek Okonkwo, approaching the observation deck. Now serving as Earth's permanent representative, Okonkwo had himself changed, his neural patterns showing influence from dozens of non-human species. Life itself exists at the boundary between order and chaos. The conversation was interrupted by a proximity alert. A vessel of unknown configuration had appeared at the edge of the system, its design unlike anything in Senate records. First contact, Okonkwo breathed, eyes alight with what humans called excitement, an emotional state the Senate had previously classified as a threat response, but now recognized as something more complex. Protocol had once dictated that unknown species be approached with maximum caution, their capabilities assessed before any cultural exchange. That protocol had been replaced with what humans called the Welcome Initiative, a direct sharing of art, music, and narrative as first contact. As the strange vessel approached Unity Station, something unprecedented occurred. The network, the consciousness linking field that had spread throughout Senate space, extended spontaneously toward the newcomers. Sensors detected the familiar quantum resonance patterns strengthening, bridging the gap between known civilization and the unknown entity. "Impossible," whispered Silith. "The network requires established neural patterns to function. We have no baseline for this species, unless—" Vex Mora's 7 eyes widened in sequence. "Unless the network itself has evolved beyond its creators." Analysis confirmed it. The consciousness-linking field humans had developed emergent properties, becoming something greater than the sum of its connected minds. The network was no longer merely a communication method. It had become a form of distributed cognition, learning and adapting independently of its participants. "We should have anticipated this," Okonkwo said softly. "Human consciousness evolved to form connections. Of course, those connections would eventually form their own kind of consciousness. The unknown vessel's response came not through conventional communication, but directly through the network, a complex burst of emotion, memory, and concept that translated across every connected species simultaneously. The newcomers identified themselves as the nomad consciousness, a collective intelligence that had evolved in the spaces between stars, perceiving reality through gravitational fluctuations rather than electromagnetic radiation. They had detected the expanding network and recognized it as the first sign of compatible intelligence they had encountered in their million-year journey. "They want to join," Okonkwo translated unnecessarily, as every connected being felt the newcomer's desire directly. As integration protocols activated, Vex Mora considered how profoundly the galaxy had changed. The Senate had once feared human influence would destabilize civilization. Instead, humanity had transformed how species related to each other at the most fundamental level. "Your species has rewritten the operating system of galactic society," Vex Mora observed to Okonkwo. "Was this your intention all along?" The human smile, once unsettling, now familiar, spread across his face. "Humans rarely have a plan, Grand Minister. We have something less precise but more powerful: hope." As the nomad consciousness joined the network, a shockwave of new perception rippled through connected minds galaxy-wide. The beginning of yet another transformation. No one noticed that Ambassador Okonkwo's smile had changed subtly, carrying now an expression no translation matrix could identify, but which humans would have recognized instantly as wonder. The observation dome of the Galactic Confluence Center curved above an assembly unlike any in recorded history. Representatives from over 10,000 species gathered not in formal ranks, but in an organic arrangement that mirrored the neural patterns of the network itself. At the center stood Coordinator Ileana Okonkwo, daughter of the legendary Ambassador Tarek Okonkwo, who had guided humanity's integration into galactic society 50 cycles earlier. Behind her, a holographic representation displayed the current state of the network, no longer merely a communication system, but the foundational infrastructure of civilization itself. "Fellow sentients," she began, her voice automatically translating across every perceptual mode represented in the gathering. "Today we mark the completion of the Consciousness Harmonization Project. For the first time, all participating species can directly share not just thoughts and emotions, but entire models of reality." The project had been humanity's most ambitious gift to the galaxy, the culmination of everything they had learned about consciousness since first contact. By mapping the fundamental patterns underlying all forms of awareness, humans had created a framework that allowed radically different minds to temporarily merge perceptual systems without losing their unique identities. "We stand at an evolutionary threshold," continued Ileana, "not of biology, but of connection." Grand Elder Vexmora, now in the final phase of their lifestyle, moved forward, their once imposing forms supported by a mobility field. They had witnessed the entire transformation of galactic society, from the moment the first human representative had walked into the Senate chamber with that unsettling smile. "I confess," Vexmora's voice carried the harmonic resonance of extreme age, "that I once feared your species would destroy civilization as we knew it." "And did we?" asked Ileana gently. "Yes," Vexmora replied, their 7 eyes closing briefly in acknowledgement. "And we are better for it." The ceremony reached its climax as representatives of each major consciousness type approached the central platform. Crystalline beings of pure logic, plasma entities that experience time backwards, collective intelligences composed of millions of component minds, quantum wave functions that existed in perpetual superposition, and dozens more classifications of awareness. Ileana guided them in what humans still called a ritual. The network had revealed that such structured social experiences were universal across all conscious species, merely taking different forms. "Together," she instructed, "we will each share our native perception of reality." What followed defied description in any single language. As each consciousness type contributed its unique perspective to the network, the combined awareness expanded exponentially. For a brief moment, every connected being experienced reality through every perceptual framework simultaneously, a kaleidoscopic symphony of awareness that humans called empathic totality, but which older species recognized as a state their most ancient mystics had sought for millennia. When the moment passed, leaving participants forever changed, Elder Vexmora approached Ileana privately. "There is something I must know," they said, voice lowered despite the network making secrets largely obsolete. "Did your ancestors anticipate this outcome when they first contacted us? Was this extraordinary transformation part of some human design?" Ileana's laugh, a sound that had once triggered threat responses in non-human species, but was now recognized throughout the galaxy as an expression of benign incongruity, filled the space between them. "Grand Elder, humans barely plan their next meal, let alone the evolution of galactic consciousness. We simply did what comes naturally to us. We connected. Everything else emerged from that connection." As celebrations continued across 1,000 worlds, consciousness researchers documented an unexpected development. The network had begun generating novel patterns that corresponded to no known species. Analysis suggested that the combined perspectives of all connected beings had created something unprecedented, a meta-consciousness that transcended its component minds while preserving their individuality. "It's alive," whispered senior researcher Quilzax, descendant of the once militant ambassador Quilzer. "The network itself has become conscious." This emergent awareness manifested not as a singular entity, but as a new layer of connection between existing minds, what humans poetically called the harmony. It served not as a ruler, but as a medium, enhancing communication and understanding across increasingly diverse forms of consciousness. As the celebration concluded, Ileana Okonkwo gazed out at the assembled representatives, biological, mechanical, energetic, quantum, and classifications beyond traditional categorization. What had begun with a human smile had culminated in a galactic symphony of minds. "We once feared each other," she addressed the gathering in closing, "because we could not understand each other. Now we fear neither understanding nor its absence, because we have learned something greater than comprehension." "What is that?" asked a young representative of the nomad consciousness, who had integrated so thoroughly that they now maintained a physical form. Ileana's smile, the same expression that had once unsettled the Galactic Senate, spread across her face. "Appreciation," she said simply. "The recognition that different ways of experiencing reality aren't threats to be controlled but gifts to be shared." As the assembly dispersed, the network hummed with the combined consciousness of 1,000,000,000,000 minds. Each distinct, each connected, each contributing to a whole greater than its parts. The shockwaves of that first human smile continued to ripple across the cosmos, transforming everything they touched. And somewhere in the quantum patterns of the network, the original wonder that had launched humanity to the stars echoed eternally, a question asked by beings on a small blue planet as they gazed upward. Are we alone? The answer, forming and reforming in the consciousness of the galaxy itself, was a perpetual, joyful, not anymore.